Maya Chin stood at the gates of Naval Base Coronado, her duffel bag cutting into her shoulder and sweat already beading on her forehead despite the early morning coolness. At 22, she looked younger than most of the other recruits streaming past her. Her small frame and delicate features made her appear fragile next to the imposing figures of her fellow trainees. She had always been tiny, even during her gymnastics days, but now surrounded by these would-be warriors, she felt invisible. The bus ride from the airport had been quiet. Maya had kept her head down, listening to the other recruits talk about their backgrounds. Football players, wrestlers, former military family members who had grown up preparing for this moment. She heard stories of high school football championships, wrestling state titles, and family legacies spanning generations of service. Maya had none of these credentials. Her background was balance beams and uneven bars, not obstacle courses and combat training. Her stomach churned as she thought about the injury that had ended her Olympic dreams 2 years ago. The torn ACL that had shattered her world had led her here, to this moment where she hoped to rebuild herself into something stronger. But, looking around at the other recruits, doubt crept in like a cold fog. "Move it, people!" shouted Petty Officer Martinez, a stocky man with arms like tree trunks and a voice that could wake the dead. "Form up in rows of 10. Now." Maya hurried to find her place, stumbling slightly as a larger recruit brushed past her. The young man didn't even notice he had bumped her, but the slight contact nearly knocked her off balance. She found a spot in the back row, hoping to blend in and avoid attention. "Welcome to hell," Martinez continued, pacing in front of the assembled group. "For the next 12 weeks, your lives belong to the United States Navy. Some of you think you're tough. Some of you think you know what it means to push your limits. You're all wrong." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she stood at attention. Around her, the other recruits stood like statues, their confidence radiating in the early morning sun. She tried to match their posture, but felt small and out of place. "Physical training starts now," Martinez barked. 5-mile run around the base. "Anyone who falls behind gets to do it again. Move." The group surged forward like a living organism. Maya found herself immediately swept to the back of the pack as longer legs and trained bodies pulled ahead. Within the first quarter mile, she was struggling to keep pace. Her gymnastics training had given her flexibility and precise muscle control, but distance running was never her strength. By mile 2, she was gasping for air while the front runners still appeared comfortable. A few other recruits had fallen back with her, but they were clearly just pacing themselves. Maya was giving everything she had just to avoid being left completely behind. "Pick it up, Chun," Martinez called out as he jogged easily alongside the struggling recruits. "At this pace, you'll be running all day." Maya tried to push harder, but her legs felt like lead. Her lungs burned with each breath, and sweat poured down her face despite the cool morning air. She watched as more and more recruits pulled ahead of her, their conversations casual as they ran at a pace that was destroying her. The final mile was agony. Maya's vision blurred at the edges, and she could taste copper in her mouth. When she finally crossed the finish line, most of the other recruits were already stretching and cooling down. She collapsed onto the grass, her chest heaving as she fought for breath. "Chun," Martinez stood over her, his shadow blocking the sun. "You finished dead last. In the real world, that means your team is dead. Think about that." Maya nodded weakly, unable to speak. Around her, she heard whispers and snickers from the other recruits. She closed her eyes and tried to push down the familiar feeling of failure that threatened to overwhelm her. The rest of the morning brought no relief. The obstacle course was a nightmare of rope climbing, wall scaling, and crawling through mud under barbed wire. Maya's small size, which had been an advantage in gymnastics, became a liability when trying to pull herself up thick ropes and scale walls designed for larger bodies. She watched other recruits attack the rope climb with confidence, their upper body strength carrying them quickly to the top. When her turn came, Maya gripped the rough rope and tried to pull herself up. Her arms shook with the effort, and she managed only a few feet before her strength gave out, and she slid back down. "Again," Martinez shouted. "Keep going until you make it to the top." Maya tried again, and again, Each attempt was weaker than the last, her hands raw from the rope, and her shoulders screaming in protest. Around her, other recruits who had already completed the course watched with expressions ranging from pity to annoyance. "Come on, Tiny," called out a recruit named Jackson, a former college linebacker who had scaled the rope like it was a ladder. "Put some muscle into it." The comment drew laughs from several nearby recruits. Maya's face burned with embarrassment, but she gritted her teeth and tried once more. She made it slightly higher this time, her gymnastics background helping her find efficient body positions, but still couldn't reach the top. After her 7th failed attempt, Martinez finally moved her on to the next obstacle. Maya's hands were bleeding, and her arms felt like rubber. The wall climb that followed was just as humiliating. While other recruits boosted each other over the 12-foot barrier with ease, Maya couldn't generate enough power to help her partners, and needed multiple people to get her small frame over the top. The low-crawl under barbed wire was the only obstacle where her size helped. She could slither through the mud more easily than her larger teammates, but by then, the damage to her confidence was already severe. She finished the course dead last, covered in mud and blood, while most of the other recruits had completed it twice. Swimming came next, and Maya had hoped this would be different. She had been a decent swimmer in high school, and her gymnast body control should have helped in the water. But the Navy's swimming standards were far beyond anything she had experienced. The pool was Olympic-sized and intimidating, filled with churning water as dozens of recruits completed laps. Maya dove in with the other members of her group and immediately felt the difference. The pace was brutal, and the other swimmers moved through the water like machines. Maya's stroke had always been technically sound, but not particularly powerful. In the pool at her gym back home, she had been fast enough. Here, she was immediately left behind as stronger swimmers pulled away from her with each stroke. Her breathing became labored, and her technique deteriorated as fatigue set in. "Chun, you're swimming like you're afraid of the water," Martinez called from the pool deck. "This is basic qualification. If you can't handle this, you'll never survive water survival training." Maya tried to pick up her pace, but her body wasn't responding. Her shoulders burned, and her lungs felt like they were on fire. She watched helplessly as the gap between her and the other swimmers grew larger with each lap. When she finally touched the wall to complete her first timed swim, the clock showed she had missed the minimum standard by over 2 minutes. The pool had nearly emptied except for 2 other struggling swimmers, and Maya. "Unacceptable," Martinez noted on his clipboard. "You'll retake this tomorrow. And the next day if necessary. Everyone swims to standard or they don't stay." Maya pulled herself from the pool, water streaming from her small frame. Her legs shook from exhaustion, and she had to sit on the edge for several moments to catch her breath. Other recruits filed past her on their way to the next training station, their conversations filled with easy confidence about the swimming test they had just passed. The afternoon brought weapons training, and Maya had hoped this might be different. Precision and steady hands were requirements she thought she could meet. The M16 rifle felt enormous in her small hands, and she struggled to find a comfortable shooting position. "Shooting is about fundamentals," explained Staff Sergeant Kelly, the weapons instructor. "Sight alignment, breathing, trigger control. Size doesn't matter if you master the basics." Maya felt a spark of hope. This was more like gymnastics, where technique could overcome raw strength. She carefully aligned her sights and controlled her breathing as she had been taught. The first few shots felt good, and she thought she might finally find something she could excel at. But when the targets were checked, Maya's disappointment was crushing. Her grouping was scattered, with several shots missing the target entirely. Recruits on either side of her had tight groupings near the center of their targets, while hers looked like a random spray pattern. "Chun, you're jerking the trigger," Kelly observed, looking at her target. "And your grip is inconsistent. You're thinking too much instead of trusting your fundamentals." Maya nodded and tried to apply the corrections, but the more she thought about each shot, the worse her performance became. Her gymnastics background had trained her to think through every movement, to be precise and controlled. But shooting seemed to require a different kind of precision, one that relied on instinct and repetition rather than conscious control. By the end of the day, Maya had failed every single training event. Her scores were posted on the board outside the mess hall, and her name sat at the bottom of every category. Dead last in running, failed on the obstacle course, failed swimming, and below standard in marksmanship. The mess hall was buzzing with conversation as recruits compared their performances and formed the social bonds that would carry them through training. Maya sat alone at the end of a long table, picking at her food and trying to avoid the stares and whispered comments from other recruits. "Hey, Chun," Jackson called out from across the room. "Maybe you should consider a different branch. I hear the Air Force is easier." Laughter erupted from his table, and Maya felt her face burn with shame. She knew Jackson wasn't being particularly cruel. Military training was competitive, and weak links were always targets for humor. But the comment still stung because it echoed her own doubts. Rebecca Williams, a tall, muscular recruit everyone called Tank, was sitting a few seats down from Maya. Tank had excelled in every event, her athletic background in track and field translating perfectly to military training. Maya expected her to join in the laughter, but instead, Tank fixed Jackson with a hard stare. "Shut it, Jackson," Tank said quietly. "Save your energy for tomorrow's training." Jackson's laughter died, and he turned back to his meal. Tank didn't say anything to Maya, but the small gesture of support meant more than Maya could express. After dinner, Maya retreated to her barracks. The building housed 40 recruits in 20 bunk beds, and the noise level was overwhelming. Recruits shared stories from home, compared training scores, and planned strategies for the next day's challenges. Maya pulled out her phone and stared at a photo of herself from her gymnastics days, standing on a podium with a gold medal around her neck. She had been so strong then, so confident in her abilities. The injury had taken more than just her Olympic dreams. It had taken her identity as an athlete. Now she was failing at her attempt to build a new identity as a sailor, and the familiar feelings of inadequacy washed over her like a tide. "Lights out in 10 minutes. Martinez's voice boomed through the barracks. Maya quickly changed into her sleeping clothes and climbed into her bottom bunk. The recruit above her was snoring within minutes, and conversation gradually died down around the room. But Maya lay awake, staring at the bottom of the bunk above her and fighting back tears. She thought about the bus ticket home sitting in her wallet. She could leave tomorrow, claim a family emergency or medical issue. No one would blame her. She was clearly not cut out for this life, and staying would only mean more humiliation and failure. But something held her back. Maybe it was pride or stubbornness, or just the fear of facing her family after another failure. Her parents had been supportive when she joined the Navy, proud that their daughter was serving her country. Going home now would mean admitting she wasn't strong enough, that the injury had broken more than just her knee. Outside the barracks window, Maya could see a lone figure jogging around the training area. Even in the darkness, she could tell it was one of the instructors maintaining their own fitness standards. The dedication impressed her. These people had made the military their life, and they excelled at it the same way she had once excelled at gymnastics. The second week of training brought no relief for Maya Chun. If anything, her struggles seemed to intensify as the other recruits improved, and she remained stuck at the bottom of every performance metric. The 5 a.m. wake-up call had become a daily nightmare, knowing it would begin another 18 hours of failure and humiliation. Maya dragged herself from her bunk as the lights blazed on, her body still aching from the previous day's training. Around her, other recruits moved with increasing efficiency, their bodies adapting to the military routine. She had hoped her own adaptation would come, but each morning felt as brutal as the first. "Move it, people!" Martinez's voice cut through the barracks like a knife. "Physical training in 15 minutes. Anyone not ready gets extra duty." The other recruits had developed their own morning routines, helping each other with gear and sharing quick strategies for the day ahead. Maya found herself increasingly isolated as her continued failures made her less desirable as a teammate or study partner. She dressed quickly and tried to keep up with the flow of bodies heading toward the training area. The morning run had become a special torture for Maya. While the rest of her class had improved their times and now moved as a cohesive unit, she still struggled to maintain even a modest pace. The gap between her and The main group had grown so large that Martinez now assigned a rotating buddy to stay back and ensure she didn't get completely lost. Today's designated babysitter was Davis, a former track runner who clearly resented being held back by Maya's limitations. He jogged beside her with obvious impatience, checking his watch and sighing audibly as they fell further behind the main group. "You know, Chun," Davis said as they labored through mile 3. "Some people just aren't cut out for this. There's no shame in admitting it." Maya was too winded to respond immediately. Her lungs burned, and her legs felt like concrete. But she forced herself to keep moving. She had heard variations of this conversation from different recruits over the past 2 weeks. Always phrased as helpful advice. Always delivered with a tone that suggested she was being selfish by continuing to struggle. "I'm not quitting," Maya finally managed between gasps. "Yeah, but think about the team," Davis continued. "Every time we have group exercises, you hold everyone back. And in real situations, that could get people killed." The words stung because Maya knew they contained truth. During team obstacle courses, she required help from multiple teammates to complete challenges they could handle alone. In swimming relay races, her slow times meant her team always finished last. Even in academic competitions, where she actually performed well, her physical limitations overshadowed any intellectual contributions. They completed the run in Maya's now familiar position of dead last, arriving at the training area as the rest of the class finished their cool-down stretches. Martinez didn't comment on their late arrival, but his expression made clear his growing frustration with Maya's lack of progress. "Today we're practicing combat scenarios," Martinez announced to the assembled recruits. "You'll be working in teams of 4, moving through simulated urban terrain while under fire. This exercise tests everything you've learned about teamwork, tactics, and staying calm under pressure." Maya's heart sank. Team exercises were always her worst nightmare, combining her individual weaknesses with the added pressure of letting down her teammates. She watched as the other recruits quickly formed into groups, old friendships, and proven partnerships coming together naturally. Maya found herself in the leftover group with 3 recruits who had also been avoided by the stronger performers. Thompson was recovering from a minor injury, Martinez was struggling with the academic portions of training, and Williams was dealing with family problems that affected his focus. They looked at each other with the resigned expression of people who knew they were starting at a disadvantage. "All right, Team 4, said Staff Sergeant Kelly, the tactical instructor. "Your mission is to move through the urban course and retrieve intelligence from the far building. You'll face simulated enemy fire using paintball markers. Getting hit means you're wounded and need medical evacuation. 2 hits, and you're dead." The course was a maze of concrete barriers, building facades, and narrow alleys designed to simulate urban combat. Maya could see other teams moving through different sections, their members communicating with hand signals and moving with coordinated precision. Her team huddled together, trying to form a plan. "Chin should stay in back," suggested Thompson. "She's the smallest, so if there's trouble, she won't slow us down as much." Maya nodded, accepting the logic even though it stung. She had become accustomed to being assigned the least important roles in team exercises. Her teammates weren't being cruel, they were being practical. The exercise began poorly and got worse. Thompson's injury slowed their movement, and Martinez's confusion about tactical signals led to miscommunication. When they encountered the first simulated enemy position, their response was clumsy and uncoordinated. Maya tried to contribute by spotting enemy positions and suggesting alternative routes, but in the chaos of simulated combat, her quiet voice was lost among the shouting. She watched helplessly as Thompson was killed by paintball fire, followed quickly by Martinez, who exposed himself while trying to help his wounded teammate. This left Maya and Williams to complete the mission alone. Williams looked at Maya with obvious resignation, clearly believing their chances had dropped to 0. They were outnumbered and facing enemy positions that had already defeated half their team. "We should just surrender," Williams whispered. "There's no way we can make it through." Maya looked ahead at the remaining obstacles. The course that had seemed impossible with 4 people now looked insurmountable with just 2. But something in her gymnastics training kicked in, the ability to visualize complex sequences and find efficient paths through challenging routines. Wait, Maya said, studying the layout. What if we don't go through the main route? She pointed to a narrow gap between two barriers that the other teams had ignored. It looked too small for most people, but Maya's gymnasts I saw it as perfectly navigable for someone her size. If I can get through there, I might be able to flank around and distract them while you move up the main route. Williams looked skeptical, but they were out of conventional options. Maya slipped through the narrow gap, her small frame fitting easily through spaces that would have trapped larger recruits. Her gymnastics background helped her move quietly and efficiently, staying low and using the barriers for cover. From her new position, Maya could see the enemy team setting up to ambush Williams as he approached from the main route. She picked up a handful of gravel and threw it to create a distraction, drawing the enemy's attention away from Williams's approach. The tactic worked. Williams managed to advance much further than expected while the enemy team investigated the noise Maya had created. Though they still didn't complete the full mission, their performance was respectable considering they had lost half their team early in the exercise. Interesting approach, Chun, Kelly commented as they debriefed. Using your size as an advantage instead of seeing it as a limitation. It was the first positive feedback Maya had received in 2 weeks of training. The comment was brief and low-key, but it gave her a small spark of hope that maybe she could contribute something valuable to her team. The rest of the day followed the familiar pattern of struggle and near failure, but Maya found herself thinking about Kelly's comment. Maybe her approach had been wrong. Instead of trying to compete directly with larger, stronger recruits, perhaps she needed to find ways to use her different attributes effectively. That evening in the mess hall, Maya sat in her usual isolated spot, but her mind was working differently. She watched other recruits and tried to identify what made them successful. Jackson relied on raw strength and aggressive tactics. Davis used his speed and endurance. Tank combined power with surprising finesse from her track background. What did Maya have that was uniquely hers? Her gymnastics training had given her exceptional body control and spatial awareness. She could move through tight spaces and maintain balance in unstable situations. Her years of precisely controlled movements meant she could be very quiet when needed. And her experience with complex routines had taught her to think several moves ahead. Mind if I sit? Maya looked up to see Tank standing with a food tray, looking genuinely friendly. In 2 weeks of training, this was the first time anyone had voluntarily sought out Maya's company for a meal. Sure, Maya replied, surprised by the gesture. Tank sat down and began eating without commenting on Maya's training struggles or offering unwanted advice. For several minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. Finally, Tank spoke. I saw what you did in the tactical exercise today. Smart thinking. Maya felt a flush of pride at the compliment. Tank was one of the top performers in their class, so her approval carried weight. Thanks. I felt useless most of the time, but at least I contributed something. You did more than contribute, Tank said firmly. You saw a solution that nobody else saw, including the instructors. That's the kind of thinking that saves lives in real situations. Maya had never thought of her performance in those terms. She had been so focused on her failures that she missed the significance of her successes, however small they might be. Can I ask you something? Maya said. How do you stay confident when things get tough? Tank considered the question while finishing her meal. I don't think about being confident. I think about being useful. Every team needs different skills. Some people are hammers, good for smashing through obstacles. Some are precision tools, good for delicate work. The trick is figuring out what tool you are and using yourself correctly. The conversation was interrupted by Jackson's voice from across the mess hall. Hey Tank, come settle an argument about tomorrow's swimming test. Tank gathered her tray and stood to leave, but paused beside Maya's chair. Keep thinking like you did today, she said quietly. The instructors notice more than you realize. After Tank left, Maya finished her meal alone, but her mind was racing with new possibilities. She had spent 2 weeks trying to become a hammer when maybe she was designed to be a precision instrument. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. That night, Maya made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going directly to sleep after lights out, she waited until the barracks was quiet and then slipped outside. She had noticed that the training area remained lit at night for security, and She wanted to practice without the pressure of being watched and judged. The obstacle course looked different in the darkness, somehow less intimidating without crowds of successful recruits making it look easy. Maya approached the rope climb that had been her nemesis, studying it with fresh eyes. In gymnastics, she had learned that technique could often overcome strength limitations. Instead of trying to muscle her way up the rope like the larger recruits, maybe she could find a more efficient method. Maya began experimenting with different climbing techniques, using her legs more effectively to take strain off her arms. She wrapped the rope around her foot in a specific pattern that gymnasts used for rope skills, creating a secure platform that allowed her to rest her weight without relying solely on arm strength. The technique felt familiar and natural. Within minutes, Maya was climbing higher than she had ever managed during official training. Her movements were smooth and controlled, using precision instead of power. When she finally reached the top of the rope, she felt a surge of triumph that had been missing since her gymnastics days. She spent the next hour practicing different obstacles, applying gymnastic principles to military challenges. The wall climb became a vaulting exercise. The balance beam sections became floor routine elements. The low crawl became a tumbling pass performed horizontally. Maya wasn't becoming stronger in the traditional sense, but she was becoming smarter about using the strength she had. Her gymnastics background was finally becoming an asset instead of a liability. When she returned to the barracks, Maya felt more hopeful than she had since arriving at the base. She was still the smallest and weakest recruit in her class, but maybe that didn't matter if she could find ways to be the smartest. What Maya didn't know was that her late-night training session had been observed. Commander Morrison made regular rounds of the base during his evening runs, and he had noticed the small figure moving through the obstacle course with unusual technique and determination. Morrison had been watching Maya's progress with interest since her first day. Her training scores were terrible by conventional standards, but he saw something in her approach that reminded him of special operations personnel he had worked with. The ability to think creatively under pressure, to find unconventional solutions to impossible problems. He made another note in Maya's file and decided it was time to take a more active interest in her development. Maya Chun was clearly not going to succeed following the standard training model, but Morrison suspected that standard training might not be what she needed. The announcement came during the third week of training, delivered by Commander Morrison himself as he addressed the assembled recruits in the main briefing room. Maya had never seen the base commander speak directly to their training group before, and his presence filled the room with nervous energy. Commander Morrison was exactly what Maya had pictured when she imagined a Navy SEAL. Tall and lean with graying hair and intense blue eyes, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had proven himself in the most demanding situations imaginable. His chest displayed an impressive array of ribbons and medals, including several Maya recognized from her research into military honors. "In 3 days, you will participate in Exercise Crucible," Morrison announced, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. "This is a 72-hour survival and tactical simulation that will test everything you have learned during your training. You will be divided into teams of 8 and dropped in remote terrain with minimal supplies." Maya felt her stomach drop. A 3-day survival exercise would magnify all her weaknesses while providing little opportunity to use the small advantages she had been discovering. The other recruits around her leaned forward with interest and excitement, but Maya could only think about how she would drag down whatever team she was assigned to. Each team will face multiple challenges requiring navigation, shelter construction, resource procurement, and tactical problem-solving, Morrison continued. Teams that fail to work together effectively will find the experience very unpleasant. Teams that demonstrate exceptional performance may find opportunities for advanced training tracks. The promise of advanced training opportunities sent a buzz of excitement through the room. Maya knew she had no chance of being selected for anything advanced, but the mention intrigued her nonetheless. She had begun to wonder what came after basic training for recruits who showed special aptitudes. "Team assignments will be posted tomorrow morning," Morrison concluded. "Use tonight to prepare your personal gear and review your field manuals." Dismissed. As the recruits filed out of the briefing room, conversations immediately turned to speculation about team assignments and strategy discussions. Maya walked alone, lost in thought about how she could possibly contribute to a team during such an intensive exercise. Chun. The voice stopped her in the hallway. Maya turned to see Commander Morrison standing in the doorway of the briefing room, his expression unreadable. "Yes, sir," Maya replied, snapping to attention. "Walk with me," Morrison said, leading her down a corridor she had never explored before. His stride was measured and deliberate, forcing Maya to move quickly to keep pace. They walked in silence through several turns before Morrison led her into a small office filled with training manuals, tactical maps, and photographs of various military operations. Maya noticed several pictures showing small unit operations in challenging terrain. "Sit down, Chun," Morrison said, taking a seat behind his desk. Maya perched nervously on the edge of the offered chair, unsure why the base commander wanted to speak with her personally. "Your training scores are terrible," Morrison said bluntly, consulting a file on his desk. "Dead last in physical fitness, failed qualifications in swimming, and marksmanship, consistently requiring assistance to complete basic obstacle courses." Maya felt her face burn with shame. Having her failures cataloged by the base commander was even more humiliating than her daily struggles in training. However, Morrison continued, "Your tactical thinking scores are in the top 10% of your class. Your approach to problem-solving shows creativity and adaptability that many recruits lack. And, according to night security reports, you have been conducting additional training during your personal time." Maya's eyes widened. She hadn't realized her late-night practice sessions were being monitored. "Tell me about your background before joining the Navy," Morrison said, leaning back in his chair. "I was a gymnast, sir. Competed nationally for 6 years before a knee injury ended my career. I joined the Navy because I wanted to serve my country and prove I could succeed at something difficult." "What made you good at gymnastics?" Maya considered the question carefully. "Precision, sir, and mental toughness. In gymnastics, you have to perform complex skills perfectly while under enormous pressure. You also have to analyze your mistakes quickly and make corrections." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "Those are valuable skills. The question is whether we can find ways to apply them in a military context that plays to your strengths rather than highlighting your weaknesses." Maya wasn't sure how to respond, so she remained silent. "During Exercise Crucible, I want you to focus on being your team's tactical thinker and navigator," Morrison said. "Don't worry about keeping up physically. Instead, think about how to use your unique perspective to help your team solve problems efficiently." "Sir, won't that just make me more of a burden to my teammates?" Morrison smiled slightly. "Chun, in special operations, we have a saying, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Sometimes the person who appears weakest is actually the one who finds the most efficient path to success. Your job is to be the brain that helps your team avoid unnecessary struggles." Maya left Morrison's office with her head spinning. The idea that her analytical approach could be valuable rather than compensated for was revolutionary. She had spent weeks trying to become physically stronger when perhaps she should have been developing her mental capabilities. The team assignments were posted the next morning, and Maya found herself assigned to Team 7 with an interesting mix of recruits. Tank Williams was there, along with Davis the runner, Martinez who struggled with academics, Thompson who was still recovering from his injury, Jackson the former linebacker, Stevens who excelled at weapons training, and Rodriguez who had proven to be an excellent navigator. It was a well-balanced team on paper, with each member bringing different strengths. Maya realized that Morrison might have specifically chosen this combination to give her the best chance of contributing meaningfully. "All right, Team 7, Tank said as they gathered for their first planning session. "We have 3 days to figure out how to work together effectively. Maya, Commander Morrison told me you should be our primary tactical planner and backup navigator." Maya was surprised that Morrison had spoken to Tank directly about her role, but she felt a flutter of excitement about being given real responsibility. "What's our first priority?" she asked, looking at the maps and mission parameters they had been given. "Water and shelter," Rodriguez replied immediately. "Without those basics, everything else becomes impossible." Maya studied the topographical map, using skills she had learned from orienteering courses during her gymnastics training. "There's a stream system running through this valley," she said, tracing a route with her finger. "If we follow this ridge line, We can stay high enough to avoid the swampland, but still have access to water. Davis looked skeptical. That's a longer route than going straight across the valley. We'll cover more distance and use more energy. True, Maya agreed. But look at the terrain in the direct route. Thick forest, marshy ground, and no guaranteed water sources. The ridge route is longer, but more efficient because we can maintain a steady pace, and we know we'll have resources. Jackson studied the map more carefully. She's right. The direct route might look shorter on paper, but it could take longer if we get bogged down or lost. Maya felt a surge of confidence as her teammates accepted her analysis. For the first time since arriving at the base, she was contributing something valuable that others recognized. They spent the rest of the day planning their approach to various challenges. Maya found that her gymnastics background helped her visualize three-dimensional problems and identify efficient movement patterns. When they discussed building shelters, she could see how to create stable structures using minimal materials. When they planned tactical approaches, she thought in terms of precise execution rather than overwhelming force. The evening before Exercise Crucible, Maya made her final visit to the obstacle course for night practice. But this time, she wasn't alone. Tank had asked to join her, curious about the techniques Maya had been developing. "Show me how you're climbing that rope," Tank said. "Your time has improved, but more importantly, you're not exhausted afterward like everyone else." Maya demonstrated her modified technique, using her legs and body position to conserve arm strength. Tank, despite being much stronger, found the technique more efficient than her previous approach. "This is brilliant," Tank said. "You're working smarter instead of harder. Why didn't the instructors teach us this method?" "I think it works better for smaller people," Maya replied. "The instructors are all bigger and stronger, so they probably learned techniques that rely more on upper body power." They spent an hour sharing techniques, with Maya teaching efficient movement patterns while Tank showed her ways to increase power and speed. It was the first time Maya had felt like an equal partner in a training exchange. Exercise Crucible began before dawn with team transportation to their starting point in the mountains. Maya's team was dropped off with basic survival gear and a series of sealed mission envelopes that would be opened at designated times during the 3-day exercise. The terrain was more challenging than any training they had done on base. Steep hillsides covered in dense forest, rocky streams that required careful crossing, and constantly changing weather that tested their equipment and preparation. Maya quickly proved her value as the team's navigator and tactical planner. Her ability to read terrain and visualize efficient routes kept them moving steadily while other teams struggled with navigation errors. Her gymnast's sense of balance helped her scout difficult stream crossings and identify safe routes for the larger team members. "Maya, what do you think about this shelter location?" Tank asked as afternoon approached, and they needed to establish their first camp. Maya studied the proposed site with the analytical eye she had developed through years of competitive gymnastics. "It's protected from wind, which is good, but look at those dark clouds. If it rains, water will run down this slope and flood us out. There's a better spot about 100 meters up the hill." The team moved to Maya's suggested location, and 2 hours later, rain began falling heavily. Looking down at their original shelter site, they could see water flowing through the area where they would have been sleeping. "Outstanding call, Maya," Stevens said. "You probably saved us from a miserable night." The second morning of Exercise Crucible brought Maya's team face-to-face with their most challenging mission yet. The sealed envelope contained orders that made Maya's heart race. Tactical scenario: hostage rescue simulation. Enemy forces holding 3 civilians in fortified position. Team 7 must plan and execute rescue operation with 0 casualties. Maya studied the intelligence photos and facility maps while her teammates discussed initial approaches. The simulated enemy position was a concrete building complex surrounded by open ground, with multiple entry points and good sight lines for defenders. Traditional military doctrine would call for overwhelming force and rapid assault, but Team 7 lacked the firepower for such an approach. "This is impossible," Davis muttered, looking at the photos. 8 recruits with training weapons against a fortified position? We don't have the equipment or experience for this kind of operation. Jackson agreed. In a real situation, they'd call in air support or bring up heavy weapons. We're being set up to fail. Maya continued studying the materials while the others expressed their doubts. Her gymnastics background had taught her to break down seemingly impossible routines into manageable components, and she applied the same analytical approach to this tactical challenge. What if we don't attack the building directly? Maya asked quietly. Tank looked up from her own examination of the intelligence. What do you mean? Maya spread the facility map on the ground where everyone could see it. Look at the building design. It's built for defense against external assault, but the internal layout has vulnerabilities. There are maintenance tunnels under the complex, and the building ventilation system connects to external access points. Rodriguez leaned in closer. You're thinking about infiltration instead of assault? Exactly. If we can get 1 or 2 people inside through unconventional routes, they can create diversions while the main team approaches from an unexpected direction. The defenders will be watching for frontal assault, not for threats from inside their own perimeter. Stevens looked skeptical. Those maintenance tunnels are tiny. Most of us couldn't fit through spaces that small, even if we could find a way to access them. Maya felt the familiar sting of being reminded of her size limitations, but this time it felt different. Instead of being a weakness that held the team back, her small stature might actually be the key to success. I could fit through those access points, Maya said. And if Tank comes with me as backup, we could coordinate with the rest of the team for a synchronized operation. Thompson studied the map more carefully. It's crazy enough that it might work. But, Maya, that puts you in the most dangerous position. If something goes wrong inside the building, you'd be trapped. Maya had considered that possibility, and it scared her. But, for the first time since joining the Navy, she felt like she could contribute something genuinely valuable that no one else could do. I'll be careful, she said. And if we plan this right, I won't be alone in there for long. Martinez had been quiet during the discussion, but now he spoke up. I say we try it. Maya's been right about everything else during this exercise. Her plans work. The vote was unanimous. Team 7 would attempt an infiltration-based rescue operation, with Maya as the primary infiltrator and the rest of the team providing coordinated support and diversion. They spent the next 3 hours planning every detail of the operation. Maya would approach the facility through a drainage culvert that connected to the maintenance system, while Tank positioned herself to provide backup and communication relay. The rest of the team would create a diversionary assault from the front of the building, drawing the defenders' attention away from Maya's infiltration route. As afternoon approached, and the time for the operation drew near, Maya felt a familiar nervousness that reminded her of major gymnastics competitions. The same focused energy, the same need for perfect execution under pressure. But, this time, instead of performing for judges and crowds, she was performing for her teammates who were depending on her success. The drainage culvert was even smaller than the maps had suggested, barely large enough for Maya's compact frame. As she crawled through the dark, cramped space, she used breathing techniques from her gymnastics training to stay calm and focused. The tunnel smelled of stagnant water and rust, and the confined space would have been claustrophobic for someone without her experience in small training spaces. Maya's radio crackled with Tank's voice. Maya, you're approaching the junction point. The maintenance access should be directly above you in about 10 meters. Maya found the access hatch and carefully pushed it open, listening for any sounds that might indicate nearby defenders. The maintenance area was dark and empty, filled with pipes and electrical equipment that provided excellent concealment. Moving through the building's interior spaces required all of Maya's gymnastic agility and spatial awareness. She had to navigate around alarm sensors, slip past guard positions, and find routes that kept her hidden while allowing her to reach the area where the simulated hostages were being held. Her small size allowed her to move through spaces that would have been impossible for larger team members. Air vents, crawl spaces, and maintenance passages became her highways through the enemy facility. Her gymnastics training helped her move silently and maintain precise control of her body position even in awkward spaces. Maya to team, she whispered into her radio when she reached a position overlooking the hostage room. I can see all 3 civilians and 4 guards. The guards are positioned to watch the main entrances, but they're not expecting internal threats. Jackson's voice came through her earpiece. We're in position for the diversionary assault. Are you ready to coordinate? Maya took a deep breath, visualizing the sequence of actions she needed to perform. Give me 2 minutes to get into final position, then begin your approach. I'll create the internal distraction when I hear your assault begin. The next few minutes unfolded with the precision of a well-rehearsed gymnastics routine. Maya positioned herself in the ceiling space directly above the hostage room while her teammates began their noisy frontal assault. The defenders immediately rushed toward the main entrances, leaving the hostages guarded by only one person. Maya dropped silently from the ceiling behind the remaining guard, using a technique from her gymnastics floor exercises to land without sound. The simulated takedown was clean and efficient, and she quickly moved to secure the hostages while her teammates continued their diversionary assault. Hostages secured, Maya reported through her radio. Beginning evacuation through alternative route. Leading 3 adult civilians through the same maintenance passages she had used for infiltration was more challenging than Maya had anticipated, but her planning had accounted for this difficulty. She had identified a larger emergency exit route that would accommodate the group while still avoiding the main defensive positions. The evacuation proceeded smoothly, with Maya's teammates perfectly timing their withdrawal to cover the hostage group's movement to safety. When the exercise concluded and the instructors called all clear, Team 7 had achieved something remarkable, a perfect tactical exercise with 0 casualties and all objectives achieved. Outstanding performance, announced the lead instructor, Master Chief Petty Officer Harrison, as he reviewed the exercise results. Team 7 demonstrated exceptional tactical planning, adaptive thinking, and coordinated execution. This was one of the most successful hostage rescue simulations we have seen from a recruit training group. Maya felt a surge of pride that was different from anything she had experienced in gymnastics. This success belonged to the entire team, and her contribution had been essential to their achievement. For the first time since joining the Navy, she felt like she had truly earned her place. The debriefing session was equally satisfying. Harrison analyzed their operation in detail, highlighting the innovative approach and effective teamwork that had made success possible. "Chun," Harrison said, addressing Maya directly, "your infiltration plan was tactically sound and expertly executed. You identified an unconventional solution to a complex problem and had the skills to implement it successfully." Maya's teammates grinned at the recognition, clearly proud of their tactical planner's contribution. Tank clapped her on the shoulder, and even Jackson offered a grudging compliment about her performance. More importantly, Harrison continued, "This exercise demonstrates how effective teams leverage each member's unique strengths rather than expecting everyone to be identical." Chin couldn't have executed the frontal assault that Jackson led, but Jackson couldn't have fit through the infiltration route that Chin used. Successful military units understand and utilize these complementary capabilities. As Team 7 returned to their campsite for the final night of the exercise, Maya reflected on how much had changed since her arrival at the Naval Training Base. She was still the smallest and physically weakest member of her class, but she had found ways to make those characteristics into advantages rather than liabilities. That evening, as the team shared their final meal of the exercise, Tank made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I've been thinking about our performance during this exercise," Tank said. "Maya's been the key to most of our successes. Her navigation kept us out of trouble, her shelter selection kept us dry, and her tactical planning made today's mission possible." Davis nodded in agreement. "I was wrong about you, Maya. I thought your struggles with physical training meant you couldn't contribute to the team. But you've been carrying us in ways I didn't understand." Even Jackson, who had been most vocal about Maya's early failures, offered his perspective. "In sports, I learned that the best teams aren't necessarily the ones with the strongest individual players. They're the teams where everyone knows their role and executes it perfectly. Maya, you found your role, and you're damn good at it." Maya felt tears threatening as she listened to her teammates' words. For months before joining the Navy, she had struggled with feelings of worthlessness and failure after her gymnastics injury. The early weeks of military training had only intensified those feelings. But now, surrounded by people who valued her contributions, she felt a sense of belonging and purpose that had been missing since her competitive days. "Thank you," Maya said quietly. This team has helped me discover things about myself I never knew existed. I came here thinking I had to become someone completely different to succeed. Instead, you've helped me figure out how to be myself effectively. The final morning of Exercise Crucible brought a surprise visit from Commander Morrison, who arrived at their campsite as the team was breaking down their gear for the return trip. Team 7, Morrison announced, your performance during this exercise has been exceptional. You've demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking and effective teamwork that we look for in advanced training programs. Maya's heart began to race. Advanced training programs were opportunities she had never imagined herself eligible for. Chun, Morrison continued, looking directly at her. I want to speak with you. Commander Morrison's office looked different during Maya's second visit. The tactical maps and operational photographs that had seemed intimidating before now felt like glimpses into a world where her skills might actually matter. Morrison gestured for Maya to take a seat, his expression more relaxed than she had ever seen it. Chun, your performance during Exercise Crucible was remarkable, Morrison began, consulting a thick file on his desk. Not just the hostage rescue operation, though that was exceptionally well executed. Your overall contribution to your team's success demonstrates exactly the kind of thinking we need in special operations. Maya felt her pulse quicken. Special operations had always seemed like an impossible dream, reserved for the strongest and most elite military personnel. Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but I still struggle with basic physical standards. My running times are terrible, and I can barely meet minimum requirements for most fitness tests. Morrison leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Chun, let me tell you about someone I knew in Afghanistan. Dr. Sarah Chun, a Navy medical officer who saved my life and the lives of 12 other service members during a complex combat operation. Maya's eyes widened. Chun is a common name, sir, but Dr. Sarah Chun from San Francisco, about 55 years old, specialized in combat medicine and small unit tactics. Morrison continued. Ring any bells? Maya's mind raced. That's my Aunt Sarah. She served as a Navy medic, but she never talked about her deployments. We knew she had been in Afghanistan, but she always changed the subject when family asked about her service. Morrison nodded. Your aunt was attached to my SEAL team for 6 months. She was small, couldn't keep up with our physical training, and looked completely out of place among a group of elite warriors. But when the shooting started, she was the most valuable person on our team. Maya sat in stunned silence as Morrison opened a different file and showed her photographs from his deployment. There was Aunt Sarah, looking impossibly young and small among a group of intimidating special operations personnel. During a complex operation in the mountains, our team was ambushed and pinned down by enemy fire. Morrison continued. 3 team members were seriously wounded, and conventional medical evacuation was impossible due to the tactical situation. Your aunt crawled through enemy fire to reach our wounded, then planned and executed a medical evacuation under combat conditions that saved all 3 lives. Morrison showed Maya tactical diagrams and after-action reports detailing the operation. She used her small size to move through spaces larger personnel couldn't navigate, her medical knowledge to keep wounded personnel alive under impossible conditions, and her analytical mind to solve problems that conventional tactics couldn't address. Maya studied the documents with growing amazement. Her quiet aunt, who worked as a civilian emergency room doctor and grew prize-winning roses in her garden, had been a combat veteran who saved lives under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Why are you telling me this, sir? Morrison closed the files and leaned forward. Because you have the same combination of analytical intelligence, determination, and unconventional problem-solving ability that made your aunt so valuable. And because I think you're ready to understand that military effectiveness isn't just about being the biggest or strongest person on the team. Maya felt a mixture of pride and uncertainty. What exactly are you suggesting, sir? I want to offer you a path into naval special warfare development programs, Morrison said directly. Not the traditional SEAL track, which emphasizes physical capabilities you may never fully develop, but specialized programs that focus on intelligence, tactical planning, and unconventional operations. Maya's mind struggled to process what she was hearing. Sir, I don't understand. I'm still failing basic fitness requirements. How could I possibly qualify for advanced programs? Morrison pulled out another set of documents. Chun, look at your scores in tactical analysis, problem-solving under pressure, and leadership effectiveness during team exercises. You're in the top 5% of all recruits we've tested in the past 2 years. Your exercise crucible performance was better than most experienced special operations personnel achieve. Maya examined the evaluation reports Morrison showed her. The scores and comments were far more positive than anything she had imagined about her own performance. Your physical limitations are real, Morrison continued, but they're not necessarily disqualifying for the roles I have in mind. Modern special operations require personnel who can think creatively, adapt quickly to changing situations, and lead teams through complex challenges. Physical strength is important, but it's not the only requirement. Maya felt like her entire understanding of her military career was shifting. What would this specialized track involve? Morrison opened a briefing folder and spread out training curriculum documents. Advanced tactical planning, intelligence analysis, unconventional warfare methods, and leadership development. You would train alongside personnel from various special operations units, learning to support high-stakes missions through strategic thinking rather than direct combat. The training description sounded both exciting and terrifying. Maya could see herself contributing to important missions, but the academic and intellectual demands would be enormous. There's something else you should know, Morrison said. Your Aunt Sarah specifically recommended you for this program. She's been following your progress since you joined the Navy, and she believes you have the same potential she demonstrated during her service. Maya's shock was complete. Aunt Sarah knows about my military service? She requested regular updates on your training from the beginning. When she learned about your struggles with physical requirements, but success with tactical challenges, she contacted me directly. She believes you're following the same path she did, and she wants to help you succeed. Morrison handed Maya a handwritten letter bearing her aunt's familiar script. As Maya read the words of encouragement and pride, she felt tears threatening to overflow. Maya, the letter read, I know military service feels impossible right now, but I see in your struggles the same journey I made 20 years ago. The Navy needs people who think differently, who solve problems other people can't see, who refuse to give up when things look hopeless. You have all of these qualities. Don't let anyone convince you that being different means being weak. Your differences are your strengths. Commander Morrison will explain opportunities that could change your life. Trust yourself, and trust him. Love, Aunt Sarah. Maya looked up from the letter to find Morrison watching her with understanding sympathy. What do you think, Chin? Are you interested in exploring this path? Maya thought about her journey from failing recruit to valued team member, about exercise crucible, and her teammates' recognition of her contributions. She thought about Aunt Sarah's secret history and her own dreams of serving her country effectively. Yes, sir, Maya said firmly. I want to try. Morrison smiled. Outstanding. Your formal transition into the specialized program begins next week. You'll continue with your current training group for basic requirements, but you'll also begin advanced coursework in tactical analysis and unconventional operations. Over the following weeks, Maya's life transformed completely. Her new training schedule included regular sessions with intelligence specialists, tactical planners, and experienced special operations personnel who taught her skills far beyond basic military requirements. The academic demands were intense, but Maya thrived in an environment that emphasized analytical thinking over physical prowess. She learned to read satellite imagery, plan complex operations, and analyze enemy capabilities and intentions. Her gymnastics background proved unexpectedly valuable as instructors taught her advanced infiltration techniques that required precise body control and spatial awareness. Most importantly, Maya's role within her original training group evolved dramatically. Instead of being the weak link who held everyone back, she became the tactical specialist who helped other recruits understand complex concepts and solve difficult problems. Tank and her other teammates were amazed by the change in Maya's confidence and capabilities. During training exercises, Maya now took natural leadership roles, directing team movements and making strategic decisions that led to consistent success. I can't believe this is the same person who couldn't climb a rope 6 weeks ago, Davis commented after Maya had led their team through a particularly challenging navigation exercise. She's always been this smart, Tank replied. We just couldn't see it because we were focused on the wrong things. The final graduation ceremony for Maya's basic training class was unlike anything she had imagined when she first arrived at the naval base. Instead of barely qualifying for advancement, Maya was recognized as the distinguished graduate in tactical analysis and leadership. Commander Morrison presented her with advanced training orders that would take her to specialized schools where she would develop capabilities she had never dreamed of possessing. More importantly, she had found her place in the military as someone whose unique combination of skills made her genuinely valuable. During the graduation reception, Maya was approached by several of her former classmates who wanted to thank her for help she had provided during their training. Jackson, who had once mocked her weakness, now spoke with genuine respect about her contributions to their team's success. Maya, I owe you an apology, Jackson said. I thought strength was the only thing that mattered in the military. You taught me that intelligence and determination matter just as much, maybe more. Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction at having earned her classmates' respect through demonstrated competence rather than demanding it through complaints or special treatment. As the evening concluded, Maya found herself standing outside the barracks where she had spent so many nights questioning her decision to join the Navy. The building looked the same, but everything else had changed completely. Tank joined her in the quiet moment of reflection. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about how wrong I was about what strength means, Maya replied. I thought I had to become someone different to succeed here. Instead, I needed to become more completely myself. Tank smiled. And now you're heading to training that most of us can't even qualify for. That's pretty amazing. Maya thought about her Aunt Sarah and the courage it must have taken to serve in combat despite being physically smaller and weaker than her teammates. She thought about Commander Morrison's recognition of capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Most of all, she thought about her teammates who had learned to value intelligence and determination as much as physical strength. The next morning would begin Maya's journey toward becoming a naval special operations specialist, trained to support the most demanding missions through tactical intelligence and unconventional problem-solving. It was a career path she never could have imagined when she first struggled with basic military training. But, as Maya prepared for sleep in her familiar bunk one last time, she reflected on the most important lesson of her military journey so far. Success didn't require becoming someone else. It required discovering how to use her authentic self most effectively. Maya Chun had failed every drill during her early weeks of training. But she had learned that failure was often the first step toward finding the right path to success. Her transformation from struggling recruit to specialized operator was complete, but her story of service and achievement was just beginning. The small girl who couldn't climb ropes had become the tactical specialist who could solve problems that stumped larger and stronger personnel. She had found her place in the military not by overcoming her differences, but by learning to leverage them as advantages. Commander Morrison watched from his office window as the new graduates celebrated their achievements. Maya Chin's success had validated his belief that the military needed people who thought differently, who brought unique perspectives to complex challenges. Her Aunt Sarah had been right about Maya's potential, and Morrison looked forward to seeing what she would accomplish in the demanding training that lay ahead. Maya's journey from failure to success had taken only 3 months, but it had required a complete transformation in how she understood her own capabilities. She was no longer the new girl who failed every drill. She was a naval professional with specialized skills that would make her valuable to the most elite units in the military. The story of Maya Chin's unlikely path to military success would inspire other recruits who struggled with conventional training requirements. Her example proved that military effectiveness came in many forms, and that determination combined with unique capabilities could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. As Maya drifted off to sleep, she smiled at the thought of calling Aunt Sarah to share news of her graduation and advanced training assignment. For the first time in years, Maya felt completely confident about her future and excited about the challenges that lay ahead. She had found her place in the world, and It was exactly where she was supposed to be. Privately, when we returned to base, there are some opportunities one think you should consider. As the team loaded onto the transport vehicle for the trip back to base, Maya found herself in an unfamiliar position. Instead of dreading her return to regular training where her weaknesses would again be exposed, she was excited about possibilities she couldn't have imagined just days before. Tank settled into the seat beside her as the vehicle began moving. Whatever Commander Morrison wants to discuss, you've earned it. You've proven that success isn't just about being the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it's about being the smartest and the most determined. Maya looked out the window at the challenging terrain they had successfully navigated over the past 3 days. The mountains that had seemed so intimidating at the beginning now looked like obstacles she could overcome with the right planning and teamwork. She thought about her gymnastics career and how it had ended with disappointment and injury. But maybe that ending had actually been a beginning, leading her toward a different kind of performance where precision, mental toughness, and analytical thinking were the skills that mattered most. Commander Morrison's conversation was scheduled for the next day, but Maya already sensed that her journey from failed recruit to valued team member was about to take another dramatic turn. The Navy was beginning to recognize something in her that she was only starting to understand herself. Maya Chin was no longer the new girl who failed every drill. She was becoming someone whose unique combination of skills and determination might make her exactly what the Navy's most demanding programs were looking for. The transformation was far from complete, but the foundation had been established through 3 days in the mountains where she had proven herself when it mattered most. As darkness fell and the rain continued, Maya found herself in the unusual position of being the most comfortable team member. Her small size made her easier to keep warm, and her careful planning had ensured they had adequate shelter and dry gear. The first day's challenges had gone well for Team 7, but Maya knew the real tests were still ahead. The sealed mission envelopes would present tactical problems that required the entire team to work together effectively, and her contributions would need to extend beyond navigation and planning. But for the first time since arriving at the Navy training base, Maya felt like she belonged somewhere. Her teammates were treating her as a valued contributor rather than a liability, and she was beginning to understand how her unique background could translate into military effectiveness. The next morning would bring new challenges that would test everything she had learned about leadership, tactical thinking, and working as part of a high-performing team. Maya Chun was no longer just the recruit who failed every drill. She was becoming someone her teammates depended on for success. Commander Morrison was monitoring the exercise from the base command center, tracking team movements, and reviewing initial performance reports. Team 7 was performing well, and Maya Chin's influence was clearly visible in their efficient movement patterns and strong tactical decisions. Morrison smiled as he read the field reports. His instinct about Maya's potential was proving correct, and he began planning the next phase of her development. Exercise Crucible was just the beginning of what he hoped would be a remarkable military career built on intelligence, determination, and the ability to see solutions that others missed. The transformation of Maya Chun from failing recruit to valuable team member was accelerating, and the most dramatic changes were still to come. The next morning brought another round of physical training, but Maya approached it with new confidence. She still couldn't keep up with the main group during the run, but her technique on the obstacles showed marked improvement. Other recruits began to notice that while Maya remained slow, she was becoming increasingly efficient. During weapons training, Maya applied the same analytical approach. Instead of trying to shoot like the larger recruits, she focused on finding a stance and grip that worked for her smaller frame. Her scores began to improve slowly but steadily. The most significant change was in her interaction with other recruits. Tank had begun including Maya in study groups for academic subjects, where Maya's analytical skills helped other students understand complex concepts. Even Jackson had stopped making jokes about Maya's performance, perhaps recognizing that she was no longer the easy target she had once been. Maya still failed more often than she succeeded, and her position at the bottom of the performance rankings remained unchanged. But something fundamental had shifted in her approach to training and in how others perceived her efforts. She was no longer just the recruit who couldn't keep up. She was becoming the recruit who found creative solutions to difficult problems, who helped others think through challenges in new ways, who never gave up no matter how many times she failed. Commander Morrison continued to watch her progress with growing interest. He recognized the signs of a special operations mindset developing, even if Maya herself didn't realize what was happening. Soon, he decided it would be time to intervene more directly in Maya's training. The transformation was subtle but real. Maya Chun was still failing most drills, but she was failing forward, learning, and adapting with each setback. Her journey from complete failure to specialized success was just beginning, and neither she nor her fellow recruits fully understood how dramatically her role in their unit was about to change. Maya closed her eyes and tried to find sleep, but her mind kept replaying the day's failures. The rope that wouldn't climb, the wall that seemed too high, the swimming pool that felt like an ocean. Every challenge had revealed another weakness, another way she didn't measure up to the standards expected of a sailor. Tomorrow would bring more of the same. More running she couldn't keep up with, more obstacles she couldn't overcome, more tests she would fail. The other recruits would continue to improve while she fell further behind, until eventually, the instructors would have no choice but to send her home. But as Maya finally drifted towards sleep, she made a decision. She would try again tomorrow, not because she thought she could succeed, but because she owed it to herself to fail completely before giving up. If she was going home, it would be after giving everything she had, not because she quit at the first sign of difficulty. She didn't know that high above the barracks, in the base commander's office, Commander Jake Morrison was reviewing the day's training reports. Maya's name appeared at the bottom of every list, just as she expected. But Morrison's expression as he read wasn't disappointment or dismissal. It was recognition. He had seen something in Maya Chun during the day's training that the other instructors had missed. Something in the way she kept trying despite repeated failure. Something in her technique that suggested hidden potential. Morrison made a note in Maya's file and decided he would pay closer attention to the young woman who was failing every drill. Maya slept fitfully that night, unaware that her struggles had caught the attention of one of the most respected commanders on the base. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and likely new failures, but it would also begin a journey that would transform her from the weakest recruit in her class to something none of them could have imagined.